Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Martha from Martha Is. Welcome to the Adam Bushell household in lockdown. What was this, week 4? Maybe? I don't know. My husband is literally there doing work. I've been furloughed, so here I am trying to make some time, trying to do something useful with my time. Tea. Anyway, what's this video about? Today is about the books that I have read in the first half of April. It's my April mid-month wrap-up. So I have read 8 books, and DNF'd 1. So let's get cracking. So the first books that I read at the beginning of April were the second and third volumes in the Heartstopper series. So here is volume 2. So volume 2 is basically... I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't read volume 1. The series is about Charlie and Nick. Charlie is gay, Nick is straight, or is he? You're going to have to get used to me saying that every time I talk about these books. And it's basically kind of a meet cute teenage story series. These are all graphic novels. So volume 2 is following on from what happened in volume 1. It's more like how they kind of move forward and what happens next. And there's some, good stuff in there about, how you define your sexuality and whether it's important, whether it's not important, who you should tell, you don't need to tell. Some good stuff in there. This is probably my least favourite of the 3. I still really enjoyed it. I think I was starting to get a little bit irritated by Charlie. I'm just finding him a slightly irritating character, but I think it's just because he's so effusively in love with Nick. So if you're not really interested in that kind of thing, this is not the series for you. There's a lot of effusive crushing. So that was volume 2, and then this is volume 3. So in volume 3 you've got Nick and Charlie going on a school trip with some other of their friends, and where do they even go? It's really bad, I can't even remember where they go. I think they go to Paris. This is one that's my favourite. I really like this, and I think it's because we had so much more exposure to the wider group of friends, and I really love the secondary characters. I particularly love Darcy and Tara, so I would love there to be a spin-off. Alice Oseman, if you're watching, please do a spin-off with Darcy and Tara. Thanks. And there's also some really good stuff in here around mental health, teenage mental health and teenage boys particularly, which I think is really important. So it's kind of just starting to deal with those things, and it looked like it was teeing up to deal with it further in volume 4 whenever that is published. So I think this is potentially... I think it had a lot of credibility, the way it's approached sexuality, the way it's approaching mental health so far. I think it's this could be a really good series of books for teenagers who are struggling with any of those things. So lovely little series. So I think I gave second volume 3 stars and third volume 4 stars. The next book I read was this one, Fearless and Fantastic. So this is all about the female superheroes in the Marvel universe. So I've been really getting back into Marvel, so we've been watching all of the Marvel movies in the kind of Avengers universe in order. So the most recent one we watched was Iron Man 3, and on Saturday we're watching Thor: Dark World. And so I was going through the website of a little independent bookshop called the Feminist Bookshop, which is in Brighton, and they are still able to deliver. And I saw this and thought, oh, that is quite interesting. So this basically profiles loads of the women in the Marvel universe who you might or might not have heard of. So, for example, there's one point in the universe where Thor is a woman. Yeah. So there's people that you might not have heard of. There's people from I used to love X-Men. So there's Jubilee from the X-Men. And yeah, so it just kind of goes through each of those, each of the people. You've got a Spider-Woman. Here you go. You've got a pregnant Spider-Woman. So it just reminded me how much the comic book universe is so massive. So I've not really read any. I think I've only ever read one Captain Marvel comic, and that's pretty much it. But it did make me want to kind of really get into it, because there's so many more female superheroes than you will see if you only watch the films, because obviously the films are very dominated by the male superheroes, and there are more lead characters played by actors called Chris than there are female lead actors. That's all I'm going to say. Hopefully that will change, but it does make me quite interested to, you know, read some of those and get more into that. So I think that I gave that 4 stars. And then another graphic novel that I read on a similar vein was Mera, Tidebreaker. So I also picked this up from the Feminist Bookshop. Picked it up metaphorically, virtually. And actually didn't realise that this was a DC comic. So if you're not familiar, you've got the Marvel Universe with superheroes such as Thor and Spider-Man and Captain America. And then you've got the DC Universe, which is superheroes like Superman, Batman, etc. And if you've watched any of the recent movies, Aquaman is also one of the superheroes in this universe, and this comic book is about that that kind of story. So you've got Mera, who is the princess of Zeba. I can't remember. It's some kind of like sub-colony of Atlantis, or it's ruled by Atlantis. And so she, it's a classic story. She's a princess. She's going to be married off. She doesn't want to be married off. And so instead what she decides to do is try to go and kill Arthur Curry, who is Aquaman. So Aquaman's backstory is that he was, he lived on land with his father. He didn't know that he was actually the Prince of Atlantis, or he didn't know that he was Aquaman. So she goes off to kind of dry land, as it were, to find Aquaman and to find Arthur Curry and kill him. And, things go awry. That's not quite what happens. I did quite enjoy this. Not a lot happened, and it was kind of, well, that's not fair, not a lot happened. It felt predictable in places, but I liked the artwork. And yeah, I did quite enjoy it. I suppose, I felt like it maybe didn't have a lot of depth, as opposed to some of the other graphic novels that I've read that aren't necessarily kind of superhero related. But I suppose given this is kind of like more of a comic, more of a continuation of various storylines, it maybe then didn't have such a kind of depth of plot. But I did really enjoy it, and I gave that 3 stars. So that's all the graphic novels that I've read so far this month. Next one that I've got here is James and the Giant Peach. So this is technically a reread, because I have very vivid memories of reading this in primary school, but I don't remember most of what happened. And I pretty much remember up to the point where he gets inside the peach, and then don't remember anything else. So it is technically a reread, but yeah. I thought it was a sweet story. I do like a lot of Roald Dahl stories. It was kind of missing, while I loved Roald Dahl as a kid, it was missing a bit of the nostalgia. So because, like I said, I didn't remember this one in particular detail. So I think I gave it 3 stars. Then we have Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. So this was a very interesting one. This is a very short, I don't know if this would count as a novella. My friend Eve from Instagram was banging on at me to read this, and I picked it up during the book crawl that we did together at the beginning of March. It's a story about a woman called Kim Jiyoung, and she's South Korean, and it's basically showing how misogyny and gender inequality impacts the lives of women kind of throughout their life. So right from childhood, all the way growing up, going to college, access to jobs, experiences in the workplace, marriage, pregnancy, etc. And because of that, I believe it was quite a revolutionary novel when it was published. It's a very powerful novel, so I gave it 4 stars. It's a very, very powerful piece of work. As a novel, I didn't find it particularly powerful. So the whole way through, I didn't understand why this was fiction. I thought it could have been narrative non-fiction, or it should have been narrative non-fiction, in my opinion, because there was just no real plot or character development outside of the points that the author was trying to make about the gender inequality and how that impacts women. And for example, something would happen and then the author would drop in a statistic saying, well, in South Korea this law was passed at this time which outlawed something. That's a bad example, but it was like something like non-fiction, a piece of information, a fact or a statistic to back up what was happening. And that's quite an unusual approach. You don't normally get like a novel and then get pulled out of the novel to have the factual evidence backing up the choices that she's making in the novel. So I was kind of being constantly sort of ripped out into the real world, and then because like every move that she made, something would happen to her. And I absolutely believe everything that happened to her. I believe that it happens to women everywhere. I mean, I've experienced some of it. I know people have experienced some of it. I do completely believe that everything in here happens to women every day, which is really shit. But because it was presented as fiction and every step was an example of sexism, almost like literally every move she made, something would happen. That almost made me believe it less, which doesn't make any sense because I do believe it. But it was just like every step was to make a point. So like when she gets married, we don't see how she meets the guy or how they got married or how they fell in love. Suddenly just she's engaged or married or whatever, and it's talking about what that's like and what the perception of her in-laws of her are, and the whole conversation about children and stuff like that. Fine, but I have no basis for believing that this is a real relationship, this is a real marriage. It felt like the husband was a tool, was a means to an end to demonstrate the sexism experienced in marriage. So yeah, so as you can see, I'm just a bit like I said, I still gave it 4 stars because it was everything in here is so important and so powerful. Like if you read it from start to end, it's such a clear, powerful summary of the extent of gender inequality and how everything is interrelated, which is really important. And so for that reason, I think you should read it. But I just think if this had been narrative non-fiction, I probably would have given this 5 stars and would have been literally like raving about it, because I would have believed it more if it was a real person. I don't know. It's just so weird. I think if I read a novel about a person who, meets a guy, gets married, all of these things happens, I want to know about how that happens. I want plot. I want plot. I want character development. I want secondary characters that aren't just a means to an end. Yeah, weird one. Like I said, 4 stars. I think everyone should read it. I think men should read it, definitely. But yeah, weird one. If you've read this, be really interested to talk to you about it in the comments. Let me know. Then we have Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. So I saw the film Practical Magic many years ago, and I don't normally do very well reading books after I've seen the film. But because there was kind of enough distance and I'd heard really good things, I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. And so I think I asked for it for Christmas. And I had heard that the story was quite different to the film, but so different. It's so different. It is a lot darker. I mean, the film is kind of dark, but in a sort of cozy, witchy way. This is very dark. There's a bit of cozy witchiness, but it's quite dark. But actually that obviously helped me in reading it, because like I said, I struggle reading books after I've seen films because I already know the plot. So because it was so different, I was able to get really absorbed in it, and it felt so much more complex and nuanced than the film is. And I think I still love the film, and I'm planning to rewatch it to kind of see the difference. But yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I really loved it. So it's about 2 sisters, Gillian and Sally, whose parents die and they go to live with the aunts, and the aunts are kind of believed to be witches, and that makes them sort of outcasts in their community. And it's all about the darkness and the nuance of magic. So you get these women coming to the aunt's house when the girls are growing up, who are desperate for to fall in love, or for specific men to fall in love with them, or things like that, and so the aunts help them and cast spells or give them potions or whatever, but then you see the terrible consequences of that and taking it literally. So there's an example of a woman who wants a man to fall in love with her, and he does, but he won't leave her alone. So he literally, she doesn't get a moment to herself. so actually the life she lives is not the one that she wanted, because the love becomes all consuming and she can't get away from it. And so that kind of theme about love as well also carries through the novel, and you see that Sally has two young daughters, and so you see the daughters grow up a bit and their experiences and things like that. So yeah, I don't want to say much more about it, to be honest. I don't want to spoil anything. It's kind of magical realism. If you've read any Aimee Bender, it really reminded me of Aimee Bender's books and made me want to reread them. So books like An Invisible Sign of My Own, for example. But yeah, I loved this. I absolutely loved it, and I think I will use this for the Reading Women Challenge as the book to movie adaptation. So I will watch the movie soon. But yeah, I really liked this one. So it's 5 stars. And then the last book is one that I DNF'd. So this is the 2 Lives of Lydia Bird. So I got given this one last month. And this is about a woman called Lydia. So Lydia is engaged to a man called Freddie. And right at the start of the book, so this is not a spoiler and it's also in the blurb, Freddie dies. And so then Lydia is experiencing, obviously, absolutely devastating grief. She was going to marry this man. And now he's dead, and then I think she's starting to move on. I guess over time starts to move on, learn to live again, maybe even learn to love again. And then it says on the back, then something unbelievable happens and Lydia gets another chance at her old life with Freddie. But what if there's someone in her new life who wants her to stay? So I did give this a good go. I think I did give it about 100 pages, but I just didn't really feel anything for any of the characters. And given that you're coming into a situation where the main character is feeling this absolutely devastating grief, and I should say, my husband dying is literally my worst nightmare. Like, I had actual nightmares about it. It's the worst possible thing I could imagine. So, and it feels really weird me saying that, given that he's sitting right there bopping along with his headphones on. But that is my worst nightmare. And so actually a book like this is something that I should really be able to gel with and relate to. And yes, that hasn't happened to me, but it is something that would really, really get me. And I just didn't feel anything. And I think it's because obviously, like, there's no time to build a relationship with any of the characters before Freddie dies or before Lydia is thrown into this grief, because it's literally right from the start. So because of that, I just didn't feel anything. And I don't want to spoil it, so I won't talk about this whole idea about her chance to live her old life with Freddie, because I have ideas of where it was going, and I didn't think they were that good. But I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. There could be some amazing twist that I did not see coming at all for how this would be possible for her to live her old life with Freddie. But if it was where I thought it was going, I was just like, no, sorry, no. So I gave up on that one. But, sometimes books just aren't for you. And that is okay, guys. That is all right. And actually, I just remembered I do have another one to talk to you about, which I don't have because I had read it on my Kindle that I finished yesterday, and that is Afropean by Johnny Pitts. So you'll see in my last video, I was talking about the Jalak Prize longlist, and Afropean by Johnny Pitts was longlisted for the Jalak Prize, and as we found out earlier this week, was also shortlisted. And so I finished that yesterday. It is a non-fiction. It's sort of a little bit travel memoir-y, but more kind of wider non-fiction, and it's exploring this whole idea of an Afropean identity, so African and European together, in reflection of Black European people. So either Black people or people of African heritage, or even wider than that, who are living in Europe or who were born in Europe, and their experiences. So he travels around, so he is a Black British man. He travels to cities such as Paris and Stockholm, Berlin, Brussels, and he just goes around exploring the experience of people who are Black Europeans. And it's so interesting. I cannot get across how fascinating I found it. I don't think I've read anything like it. I don't think I've seen anything like it. And it's just so because I think a lot of the stuff that I've read about race has been imported from America, so it's the African American experience. I've read some stuff which is about the Black British experience, but the wider Black Europe, like continental European experience, I just have never seen anything about that. And it is just so fascinating to see the variety of experiences, but also the commonalities. So there are some things that really stuck with me, like for example, France, the way that they deal with race. They have recently passed a law that means France as a country doesn't recognise distinct races. So if you don't recognise them, that means that you, for example, would not collect data about the experiences of people from different races. So that by that way, you'd never collect any data to show that you have a racism issue, which they do, because all European countries do. So I thought that was just absolutely mind-boggling that they could do that. So it's just... So that's just one example, but it's just utterly fascinating. And I feel like it's going to be the type of book similar to books like The Good Immigrant, where they're just going to stick in my mind. I'm going to read them again and again because there will always be something new to find in it. I would highly recommend that. So right now, that would be my favourite to win the Jalak Prize. There's one book that I haven't read that's on the shortlist that I'm waiting to be delivered. But right now, that is my absolute favourite to win. That's it. That's all the books I've read so far in April. I will be back again soon for another video, probably books that I bought, because I'm still buying books, guys. Still buying. I'm trying to slow down, but it's still happening. But I hope you're all doing very well. I hope you and your loved ones are safe. Let me know what you've been reading. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And I will see you again soon for another video. Bye!